Assalamu alaikum everyone, and we have with us Shaykh Kashif Zakiuddin. We're introducing him history and Islamic studies.
My name's not Kashif.
Did I say Kashif Zakiuddin? Is it? Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome to today's Unscripted Podcast. We have a special one today. We're introducing our new History and Islamic Studies editor. Take two, I'm hoping you're getting his name right now. It's Shaykh Kashif Zakiuddin. Assalamu alaikum, Kashif.
Wa alaikum assalam.
How's it going?
Good.
So this is the first time we're introducing you to the real world out there.
Yep, seems like it.
He's coming on board, mashallah, as History and Islamic Studies editor, like I mentioned. And just to get to know you a bit more, we're going to do a little rapid fire thing that you've seen many times before. No pressure. The key is to just be quick.
I've never seen
quick
one before.
Quick in answering. Right? I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
Just whatever comes into your mind first. Yeah.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
What's your favorite food?
Oh God, don't know.
Quick.
Kebab.
Nice. Were you
too many different foods are my favorite foods.
Yeah, give this man a raise.
To pick.
You're working in the right place. Were you shocked when you found out what Turks call a kofta?
I still don't know what they call a kofta.
They call like a long a kofta with an e. It was like a long shish kebab.
Yep, kofta. Was I surprised?
And
it kind of made sense.
Me growing up, kofta is like a ball of...
Ball, isn't it?
Yeah. So I was like... anyway, kebabs. Kebab is a whole genre.
It is indeed.
Biryani or naan?
Naan, definitely.
Cake or gulab jamun?
Cake, I'd have to say.
Tea or coffee?
Probably still tea, but coffee, maybe.
Right now. Starbucks or bleach?
Baffled.
So Kashif is what we might call a coffee snob.
I'm far from it,
bro. I'm actually quite upset with you.
I know coffee connoisseurs, but I'm not one of them. I don't count myself as one.
I mean, I guess it's a sliding scale to a simpleton like myself who has many loyalty points from Starbucks and Costa. I'm quite upset with you because ever since you told me that Starbucks has a burnt taste, now I've been tasting it.
It really does.
So you've ruined it for me.
But I'm far from a connoisseur. My wife's more of a coffee connoisseur than I am. So
Coke or Pepsi?
Coke, probably.
Oh, no. Let's edit that out. All these are food related. So football or cricket?
Cricket.
Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat? I think you don't know either of those things.
Neither of those. I don't know what they are. Well, I do know what they are, but I've never played them.
Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings?
That's just an insult, bro.
Yeah.
I could even suggest a comparison between those two.
Insult because...
I'm not even going to go there, man. Come on. It doesn't merit answering that question, bro.
Not a long, boring movie fan?
Who came up with... Who came up with that question?
I came up with that.
Jahil.
We need to record that as a thing. Jahil. Okay, so obviously a diehard Harry Potter fan there. Okay,
is that the Twilight Zone?
The Islamic Studies editor and Histories editor. So they're coming on as kind of we're merging two kind of things for yourself. I thought we'd start talking about your Islamic Studies background and your, when you got into, when were you kind of radicalized, when did you kind of get interested in your Islamic identity? Go back
pretty young age.
All the decades ago.
Yeah. God, my age is going to be revealed here now, isn't it?
So
I don't know
let's
if
say
I
15 years ago when you were kind of...
This is maybe have to sort of multiply that by several factors. We'll get in the right ballpark.
Just counting the days.
the sound effects are rather off-putting. Okay. We have to go back a long way. I don't know how is it really. Do we really want to delve that deeply?
Depends. If you say anything embarrassing, we can cut it out later.
Right, okay.
And that's all we have time for today.
My Islamic identity. There are a number of events from my early, quite young age that I think impacted me as a person.
You grew up in South London, right?
Yeah.
So there was was that like an Islamic emirate back then, or
no,
a beacon of Islamic learning?
No, none of those things. I guess just news. The news used to be on in our house, and I had older brothers who, would watch the news. My dad was always thing, and events around the world, and then some at home as well. So, what were they? Some of those formative events. These are all in the late 80s, man. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So. The
Rush, born, man.
In fact, they're so far back. I can't even. I can't even.
So like
work
Kennedy
out the chronology.
and Cuban Missile Crisis, basically.
Not quite. I was thinking that just by a few years only, but yeah. And let's see. The Rushdie affair, first Palestinian Intifada, the bombing of Libya. During the Reagan regime, and a number of other incidents, I think that kicked off in the late 80s that all, had something to do with Islam. Probably, I would say the biggest one out of those would be the Rushdie affair and the Intifada in Palestine.
So not everyone will know what the Rushdie affair is.
Wow.
And,
okay.
Because a lot of people were born.
After 1988 or 1987 or whenever that was, somebody will probably
What was it about though? So
the brief overview of what that was. So in the late 80s, a famous British novelist of Indian extraction called Salman Rushdie wrote a novel called The Satanic Verses, in which there is a kind of a character who is based on, or not based on, rather, it sort of mocks the person of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Muslims at the time were rightly outraged at the book, and it kicked off all sorts of incidents and all sorts of repercussions here in the UK. There was famously, I guess if you recall, there were book burnings. There was internationally there was the fatwa of so at that time Iran again those of this is now history now, I think. There's the late Ayatollah Khomeini was the supreme leader of Iran, and he issued a fatwa saying that Muslims should go and kill him, and he was a death threat, and he was under constant police protection, and that sorted all sorts of problems. And then there was the Palestine Israeli conflict on running, and that escalated with the Intifada. So there was this I can't even remember what started it now precisely, but yeah. So there was an uprising there, and then there were lots of other geopolitical events going on at the time that were, I think, formative for guys. Well, not like you. You're a butcher. You're a young, quite much a younger lad. But stuff going on in South Africa, the apartheid struggle, even though not directly related to Islam, kind of just made you interested in world affairs and then identity as well, I guess. So
those things kind of. Had they not happened, would you think you would have? What would have your identity been like? Maybe
I don't know. Maybe something else would have come along that would have kickstarted that same process. Islamic faith was, alhamdulillah, was always a prominent part of our household anyway. Alhamdulillah.
So you kind of raised in an atmosphere of your Muslimness, and Islam was.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
You didn't have a kind of road to Damascus moment.
No. There was a road to Damascus moment, maybe in terms of using glibly using the term being radicalized, but alhamdulillah, raised praying salah and, attending the masjid, learning Quran, fasting in Ramadan being a big thing, in the house. And so I didn't come from a background of not observing the faith to doing that. That was, alhamdulillah, already there. But I guess it was a more shifting to a more, involved, a more involved approach, or a more involved look at faith.
Yeah. Well,
sounds a bit thing now, but because I was just a kid then, so I wasn't obviously thinking like it in that in those terms. I had my older brothers were, so I'm the youngest. My brothers are quite a lot older than me. And they were kind of, late teens, hitting university, and they had kind of, it's like, their friends were all, all practicing, and they'd bring home books that were, religiously, of religious topics as well. So
when do you start kind of studying a bit more?
Seriously? When did I start studying a bit more? Well, I was always, again, alhamdulillah, influence of my brothers and stuff. I always enjoyed reading from a very young age. I can't remember exactly when. I don't remember picking up my first ever book, but I enjoyed reading from a very young age. And then I guess when I hit
Lord of the Rings.
Oh yeah, no. Lord of the Rings? Who's that way? So
I think Warner Brothers. Probably someone else.
So amongst the other books that were in our house were apart from Lord of the Rings, a number of other books. We used to visit the library regularly, and I think around the time I was transitioning to secondary school, I started reading a little bit more. And we used to go to the mosque, apart from Fridays, regularly on a Sunday with my dad, and they used to have a bookshop, or not a bookshop, a bookstall outside the mosque. And they'd be selling, just a selection of the books. It's like, again, a different world to today. There's just like, in terms of, people think there's still not a lot available. I mean, you need to compare it with what was available then, which is hardly anything. So there's just one guy.
Probably easier then, though. You had less of an inhibition by the amount of choices that you have. It's kind of
maybe. But what did I pick up? So Ahmed Thompson's Dajjal and the New World Order. Strange book for a 12-year-old to pick up. I kind of grabbed that.
It all makes sense now.
What else was there? A few other books and bits and pieces. We already had a few books in our house on top of that, like I said, my brother's books, and I just started reading. I already felt that, from watching the news, there was enough news on the TV about Islam to make you feel like, Islam is kind of under threat, or, you're a target if you're Muslim. I mean, again, it's totally different atmosphere to today, but, you felt
really?
like...
it felt more of a threat than the war on terror kind of era?
No, I said less so than that, if you compare it. Yeah. But for whatever reason, still, it was enough for me to feel like, Islam is not welcome here, or Islam is not, it doesn't fit in. It's not a natural part of the landscape.
Do you think that cemented your identity, or it raised a few questions?
No, it raised questions. I wouldn't say there were any crises, but it raised questions. So I read. I mean, my brother had the autobiography of Malcolm X. I read that. He had the first. It wasn't the first. It was the only volume of Sayyid Qutb's Fi Dhilal al-Quran at the time, which had been translated, which is Juz Amma. And I read parts of that as well. And we picked up a copy of Abul Hasan Ali Nadwi's Saviors of Islamic Spirit, which was, again, a really formative book. So I think those were probably...
These when you were kind of a youngster.
Yep.
Then what happened then? You went to...
then I picked up... Yeah, I guess I had an underlying feeling of like, so for me, Islam became very much started visiting the mosque more on my own. In addition, my dad would take me once a week on Sundays. There was, and then I was older. I got to the age where I was old enough to kind of go down on my own. Even if my brothers couldn't take me, my brothers sometimes, if they were at home, they went at college or university, would take me. But I started going on my own to the mosque a lot more. Started thinking a lot more about my faith, a lot more about what was happening with Islam. There was a sense in my mind, very young, obviously naive, and unlearned mind, that there's kind of there's crises. The ummah, again, without having a very solid understanding of the ummah globally, there was still the impression that Muslims and Islam are under threat. We're under the foot of the dominant powers in the world. And I read a book. I picked up a book that kind of struck a chord with me. Tiny little pamphlet. I was about 13, 14. I can't even remember now the title of the pamphlet. It eludes me now. But it was on following the Quran and Sunnah. And it,
I can foresee the trajectory now.
And it started. The preface as well was what was important, right? It just had a few words in there saying that when you look around the world, you can see the chaos. You must observe the chaos and the crisis and the difficulty. The Muslims are facing. So exactly as you said. Check, and then it said, well, what's the reason for that? Muslims have left adhering to their faith properly. What's the solution? Return back to following the Quran and Sunnah.
Unlike everyone else.
Yeah, exactly. Simple message, but it really hit a core. Okay, it hit a core for me. Then the rest of the pamphlet was just ayat from the Quran speaking about following the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then a selection of well-known ahadith as well on the same topic. So I read it.
So do you think that at that time there was like a few answers to that question?
Well, what happened is that I went to
people would go down.
I didn't really think of it like that. It didn't. That's not happened to me. It was just
what's the reason for all this chaos?
Yeah.
Khilafah is the answer, or
no?
Quran and Sunnah
those answers came a bit later. Those debates came a bit later. I wasn't even exposed to those. Right. I mean, I didn't at the time. I didn't really understand that. I was a South Asian Muslim from a Hanafi background in a mosque that you would sort of nominally call Deobandi Tablighi today if you were kind of dividing them in terms of classifying them, right? But I read this pamphlet. I didn't know who it was by. I looked at the name on the back, and I think it said Harakat Islah Shabab al-Muslimin on it. I didn't know who they were. Right, yeah, we know who they are now. If you're into the kind of 80s and 90s history.
Actually, I'm joking. I have no clue.
All right, okay. Well, you'll find out. And the guy who wrote the preface was a chap called Abu Muntasir.
Okay.
And then I didn't know who he was. And then there was a conference going on. A conference at it was
before GMS.
A young Muslim. The Young Muslim Conference in Malvern Hills, in the Malvern Hills. And I was really desperate to go to it. I persuaded my dad to go.
How old were you?
I was 13, 14.
So what makes a 13, 14-year-old excited about going to an Islamic conference? That sounds really strange to me.
I can't remember.
Maybe it was a norm back then, but right now I feel kids just want to, watch YouTube videos and...
Well, there was no YouTube.
There you go. Maybe that's right.
There was no YouTube, and we didn't watch a great deal of TV. We did a bit of TV, but not too much.
Just the news.
And David Attenborough documentaries.
Oh, that young, youthful firebrand.
Yeah, he wasn't a firebrand there. He wasn't evangelizing about the environment back then. So I just went along, and when I turned up at the YM conference, I didn't know who they were, but I guess I'd seen a flyer for it in our local mosque.
YM were like kind of Ikhwani type. Were they?
Yeah, a youth organization essentially for
I used to go to the camps types.
Yeah, I mean, again, I had no idea who they were or you know, but there were I think there were a few of their guys who were active in our local mosque, right? And they handed out some flyers. I took one home. I read it. I looked at some of the contents. It said that I was already familiar with the autobiography of Malcolm X. I'd read it. It was amazing, and they were going to be talking about him as well. Yeah. So that was definitely one of the things that attracted me. This is like we're in the early 90s. So Gulf War, we've had the Gulf War. Ahmed Deedat was a big feature of our lives back then. For those people who don't remember, he's like the pre-Zakir Naik, or maybe that's almost kind of actually lowering the status of Ahmed Deedat, because he's the originator of that kind of dawah
TV
work.
debate style.
Yeah,
thing.
It wasn't even in his time. It was more big lecture halls, Royal Albert Hall. He'd pack that out, debating Christian apologists, and everybody would go along. Both my brothers went to this big debate that he had at the Royal Albert Hall. I was too young to go, but they came back from it buzzing. Again, this is back. We've rewinded slightly. This is back in the late 80s, and they'd gone to it, and I wished I could have gone, but like I said, I was too young to go to it. And so fast forward now to this YM conference, and he was on the bill. He was he was the headline speaker. So it was like definitely. So I guess that explains a little bit more about what kind of maybe.
So your
and I was there.
love for history was developing in parallel with your Islamic studies?
There was not too much. I was just interested. I was reading and I was interested in history, but it wasn't the same interest that I have that kind of blossomed later in life. But I mean, in terms of my own journey, what happens is I turned up at the conference and I saw these, like, there was this thousands of Muslims, but there was like a small crowd, or like a tiny bunch of really I'm trying to find the right polite way to describe them. A bunch of young guys who looked totally different to everybody else. So they had these long shirts, thobes we'd call them, right? And long flowing beards and turbans. They stood out. Nobody looked like them. So I went over and started I went over to them out of curiosity and started talking to them. And they were very willing to talk to people. And it just so happened that one of them was Abu Muntasir, completely coincidentally. So it hadn't been that much longer before I'd read the book, read that little pamphlet by him, and then I sat down and listened to those guys, and they were saying the same thing that they were saying in that little pamphlet, by elaborating it. And long story short, it's already been quite long. I essentially signed up as a young convert to Jimas and to early 90s early 90s Salafism, and
what was your trajectory then?
That wasn't like, so I was mixing up dates. That wasn't 90. That was 1990. Was that YM conference? 1990 was that YM conference. Then I just went through, like, I guess everybody everybody who's from at least the London area, southeast, because it's a bit different dynamic to the rest other parts of the UK. I just went through that standard or pretty much that standard trajectory of being a kind of a Salafi. So
what was the dawah kind of scene back then, and how is it different in terms of today?
Things were a lot clearer. In a sense, everybody was in, that we come to the point you're talking about now, where, there was that once when you got into a particular school, like Jamaat Salafism or something, right? At that stage, everything became far more ideological and sectarianly defined in a sectarian way. So there was Jamaat and the Salafis, and then there were the Hanafi, the Deobandis, and then there were the Tablighi Jamaat, and then there were Hizb ut-Tahrir.
Overall, that variety was a positive or a negative in terms of having a space to have a belonging. there's some
there was definitely. I think there was some definitely positives. Of course, there's a lot of negatives as well. And then a little bit later in the, again, it's kind of hard to imagine, but there was no real traditionalist Sufi kind of voice right at the very early 90s. And then Hamza Yusuf, New Keller kind of came on the scene, and that whole that whole strand emerged or almost exploded. It had because people wanted to kick back against the kind of loudmouth Salafis, I guess you could say, perhaps.
Were you a loudmouth Salafi?
I don't know if I want to answer that question.
If anyone's watching and they knew Shaykh Kashif back in the day, let us know in the comments below.
But anyway, so eventually we come in. So that's more the Islamic side, isn't it, right? And then...
So, but what about your study? You went abroad, and you did.
So, if we're still staying on Islamic studies, I guess that was the thing, right? I guess that
was the trendy thing to do.
Yeah, if you were in that Salafi bubble, it was like about studying with the mashayikh, right? with the ulama, and learning Arabic.
Where did you go?
I learned Arabic mostly here in the UK. Back then traveling abroad was a thing, actually. People, I guess, from the Salafi, if you were in the from a Salafi kind of background, back then the place to go to learn Arabic was either Medina University or Egypt wasn't really a big thing back then. It was to go to Damaj, to the, again, for those who don't know, that's kind of a village up in the mountains in Yemen, where a prominent Salafi scholar called Muqbil ibn Hadi al-Wadi'i was based, and he was very, very that was a sought after location to get to. I mean, I was too young to kind of undertake that kind of journey.
So you learned Arabic over here?
Yeah, I mean, Arabic wasn't the very first thing I did. There was a few steps before I got to that journey. But I mean, that journey got kick-started really not on my own, but when a few other people in my area started learning Arabic, and I was I'd made a few rudimentary steps on my own. But then I guess when I had a very old, close and dear friend of mine, he started learning Arabic as well, and we were kind of just I guess were inspired by one another, and just pushed on, started learning Arabic, attending classes, listening to lectures before I was able to access Arabic. It would be listening to English lectures. Again, in our circle, or amongst my particular circle, the most influential figure was an American, Arab-American speaker, Sheikh Ali Tamimi.
Oh, okay.
He'd come to another conference. Conferences were a big thing back then. I don't know if are they these days? I don't know if you could say conferences are a big thing.
I think so.
They probably are, yeah, but they're different. They feel different to, I guess, the way they were back then. That just could be an age thing. But YM used to do them, and then GMAS got on board with the GMAS were doing the conference as well.
Where did you, what kind of Islamic scholars influenced you once you kind of started dipping your feet into Arabic? Who was kind of an influence on you, either in person or
so of course we weren't. It would be what's the right word? So it's not coming to me, but it would be, I guess, for want of a better word, it would be inaccurate to claim that we were studying with these scholars as students, because we weren't. We were over here and they were abroad, but they were still influential. I mean, I've already mentioned in English, Ali Tamimi was probably the most important influence. And then by the time we transitioned to learning Arabic, clearly it was all mostly via tapes. Back then, again, this is probably sort of ancient history now. Again, I don't know if that requires any kind of explaining. But audio cassettes, and there were loads of tapes by obviously one of the major figures in 20th century Salafism, Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin al-Albani. His tapes were widely available, and definitely I listened to him. My friends listened to him. Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen as well would probably be sort of, a close second. And I'm trying to think now, who else did we listen to? There were some slightly more radical voices, but their tapes also at that time were available. Shaykh Safr al-Hawali, Shaykh Salman al-Awda. We listened to a bit of them. Lots more politics followed about, who they were and exactly how they fit into, which probably don't need to go into. And I guess the last major figure, less well known than all of those previous four, but in a way was influential in the kind of crowd that I moved into kind of moving us in a more academic direction in terms of Islamic studies was a sheikh called Salih al-Shaykh, who was at the time, we didn't know, but at the time he was Deputy Minister of Islamic Affairs in Saudi Arabia, and then he went on to become the Minister of Islamic Affairs. But his tapes had a much more kind of an academic flavor to them, even more than the ones by, Shaykh al-Albani and Ibn Uthaymeen. And I guess, it was listening to him, I wouldn't say perhaps more than anything, but that had a big effect on getting us interested, or not interested, I guess inspired to try to get into really deep Islamic studies.
What happened then? Did you go and get?
No, so that was an unrealized dream, or maybe one that was one that perhaps I wasn't actually maybe just cut out for. But that was the hope and aspiration at that time. Now so we did a little bit here, going through those kinds of tapes and lectures here in the UK, and studying with people who are more senior than me and who had learnt more than me. And then there were a few trips abroad, to Medina, to Saudi Arabia, and then I went. I'd already started learning Arabic, but I'd made some decent headway in that way. But when it comes to university, I'd standard kind of trajectory. I was doing, I did STEM subjects for A levels, and I was going to go into. I did into one of this, fairly standard choices for a degree, but I hated it, and I dropped out of university and tried to work out what to do. And whilst I was doing that, I decided to go abroad to kind of further my Arabic, and I went to an unusual place for a Salafi. Actually, I went to Syria, which already by that time. No, actually, it hadn't. It was emerging as a place for the Sufi, for those who came from a Sufi crowd to go to. And so I was actually one of the early guys to travel to Syria, and I spent about half a year in Syria completing my Arabic studies and doing a bit more Islamic studies as well whilst I was over there. And then I came back to the UK. My interest in history, which I had said was always kind of there in terms of, and I enjoyed reading as a kid, and I enjoyed history stuff. We can, it's already got exploring my past life has gone way beyond it should have. This is but I had the choice. I had the choice of universities deciding what to do, and I decided to apply to SOAS for Arabic, and I applied just before I left to go abroad to study, and when I came back, I found out I'd got in, and I joined SOAS, and I switched up my degree from doing a straight Arabic degree to doing Arabic and a history degree, and it was the best choice I ever made. I loved it. It exposed me to historical research, historical writing, exploring history, which I had been doing. I'd been listening to, by this stage, I'd been listening to stuff in Arabic on history as well. And, I'd picked up various tape series and stuff and gone through them. And
I want to get into your kind of to the history topic, but to kind of round off the Islamic studies dimension, how would you say the kind of Salafism in the West that you've been exposed to has changed over the years since you started your career and like.
Yeah, again, that's such a long conversation, so it's already been quite a rambling.
Don't want to cut out the boring bits.
Rambling. Well, there'll be nothing left then. There's a 30-second clip. Yeah, so it's already been a very rambling discussion. That's too long to get into, I think. Almost, it's very different. You know, there was the Salafis were themselves there was one. I guess, you know, Jimas was the major Salafi entity right at the beginning of the 90s, right? And that pretty much was all there was in terms of. I guess there probably were. I mean, I was a young teenager at the time. There probably were. In fact, I know there were other fringe Salafi type or Salafi affiliated movements and figures in the London area, at least in the southeast at the time. But I didn't really know who they were. But they definitely were fringe. I think that wouldn't be inaccurate to say that. And then Jimas and Salafis underwent their own, what's the word for it? You know, their own splits and divisions, and that became a major feature of that particular discourse in the 90s as you moved through, and then
So do you think the history is characterized by just splitting further and further and?
No,
maybe
I think that's
there's a stereotype of
kind
of black and white Salafi, and then you have some, you know,
the splitting kind of
and then you become anti-Salafi. Kind of that's the kind of stereotypical trajectory. You know, people feel maybe
it's one of the. I think that's one. There's you could
stereotype.
You could if you're looking at stereotypes, there are 2 or 3 perhaps. You know. Paths that you can kind of, you know, identify that commonly people kind of take. I haven't sort of gone. Like a lot of people, you know, you get older, you mature, you learn more, you see more, you experience more of life, and you know, you reassess things. I wouldn't call myself Salafi, you know. It's not a moniker that I would. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's not a moniker that I would attach to myself.
Because some people, they, you know,
and it's been a long time.
They become anti-Salafi, or they kind of begin to resent their own history and.
I wouldn't fit into that category. Yeah. I wouldn't fit into that category. I don't sort of
kind of just mellowed out.
Well, I hope so. that would be me saying, If others say that, then that'd be good. But
good. Just before we continue, there's quite an I think contextual clip for this next part, which is Voice of the People.
Right.
A lot of the problems that you mentioned, they can be resolved by people having the correct knowledge and knowing what to do in the correct time and environment. What do you think that we now as Muslims need to do to make the religion and seeking knowledge more appealing and more enticing to people?
I didn't say because of knowledge. Some people know, but they don't put this knowledge into practice. We need knowledge from one side, and we need tarbiyah on this knowledge, so we will be able to put this knowledge into practice. One key problem that we have now in terms of knowledge, that knowledge is not contextualized. And that's why we are unable to put that knowledge into practice. So scholars, imams, they need to contextualize knowledge and to make it applicable for people so people can put it into practice.
So what do you think about that?
Sounds good.
Yeah, in terms of contextualizing knowledge, that's something that we try and do on Islam21c. One thing we try and avoid is just delving into theoretical subjects and this is a history thing as well. It's probably something that you might see as a potential rabbit hole or something potentially harmful to bring up, for example, theoretical debates and discussions and what we might call knowledge historically, and bring them up today in a decontextualized way, right? Kind of keeping our I don't want to say ivory towers, but just talking about theory without telling people or without contextualizing Islam as a lived kind of thing for people today. A lot of, like, if I see some of my cousins or just people when I go to their house and stuff, and they see what, just with their permission, of course, look at their YouTube videos, what kind of stuff comes up on their feed. A lot of it is kind of really theoretical debates from history.
Okay.
Yeah. And they almost kind of reviving learned khilaf.
All right, yeah.
Yeah,
I think I've observed some of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things is, we want to push on Islam21c is the purpose of knowledge is to actually benefit, right? And that's the thing that I've always, especially recently, I've had a few kind of wake-up calls. Like there's this someone who, I don't know who they are. They've been sending me messages, asking me questions. Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I don't know, someone maybe in a local mosque or whatever gave a thing after khutbah or whatever. The people just say, "Oh, here's the imam's number."
Right.
So they were like, and I found this. I think it's by the sound of it, it's like maybe a new Muslim or kind of someone who's come back to kind of practicing or newly started practicing and stuff.
Sure.
A sister, for example, and I just noticed like a question she had. Very simple one. But then when I scrolled up, there's like loads of questions like that. And it was like a question that goes like this. I realized that I didn't have wudu. I realized that I didn't use the miswak. So do I have to repeat my fajr and my 11 rakat of night prayer and my this and my that? And I was thinking, wow, man, this is embarrassing that, this person, they're asking. So in a I suppose, theoretical sense, they might not have that much information about what the wudu and all that kind of stuff. But in their practice, they're putting people who know more than them to shame.
Right, yeah.
And when I scrolled up, and it was like similar things like, I accidentally ate a donut when a friend gave it at work. Is my fast invalid? What are you doing to me, man? They're supposed to do, the questions are like, fasting and reading so much Quran and dhikr and all these types of things. And I was thinking that the type of knowledge or the lionizing of knowledge as information, right, in today's day and age, is.
I mean, I don't see at the moment. I'm not sure I see too much problem in those questions, right?
The problem is that I don't know. Me certainly, I found that knowledge has become so important for us. Yeah. That we know we have lots of information, but these people are actually executing the purpose for Allah giving knowledge or knowledge existing, information existing.
Right.
That they're actually practicing Islam.
All right. Okay. So you're not remarking that those questions are negative then.
No. Those questions I'm saying the questions are the questions, right? If somebody is newly learning something, they have to learn something. But the fact that even at that such simple questions, that person's already practicing Islam more than me. And more than many people who have lots of knowledge was worrying. And I felt that maybe, I don't want to say we were, maybe we lied to ourselves in thinking that, knowledge and gaining and learning all this information and reading these books and listening to these lectures and stuff, that in and of itself is something virtuous. Because then we see, all of these ayat and hadith about, the praise-seeking knowledge and so forth. Then when I looked back at them, I saw the context around some of them. I was like, wait a second, it's not simply the knowledge as information that's being praised here, right? It's the people who have khashiyah, for example. It's the people who are, and I forgot off the top of my head, those ayat, and I had a kind of few lists. I was thinking to myself, wait a second, but knowledge is praise in Islam, yeah? Like, different ayat and hadith and so. But when I looked at the context, it's not the knowledge that's being necessarily praised.
Sure.
It's the... It's so many other things that are connected to knowledge. And I thought it was kind of a wake-up moment for me as well. I mean, I even saw that I had one lecture with somebody kind of breaking down this misconception of knowledge being... We've kind of lionized knowledge for knowledge's sake. Yeah?
Yeah.
That even the Sahaba, radiallahu anhum, they used to be... It was like a norm that they wouldn't ask questions. Those who lived with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah. And they would actually get happy when a visitor would come, because then they would get a chance to listen to questions and learn some information, because you don't need that much information. You don't need that much knowledge to know that, okay, you should pray, you should fast, you should recite Quran, you should make dhikr, and, you know, the good akhlaq and so forth. And we kind of, I felt myself that maybe we're cheating people by lionizing knowledge so much to the point where people might think, because I'm seeking knowledge, because I've sought knowledge, I can take my foot off the pedal of, you know, ibadah and activism and, you know, being active in the community and that kind of stuff. And it was, I don't know, rambling here.
No, you're not rambling, but I mean, there's a lot. You've said a lot, and unpacking that, and I wouldn't like to sort of say that, you know, in unpacking that I have the answers or I can comment authoritatively on what you've said, but you know, certainly, you know, thoughts of my own or questions of my own. I mean, broadly speaking, I think pretty much everybody across the spectrum, you know, of Muslim views, everybody would accept the notion that what's required is God-fearing people, right? Well, that's what's required. People that, you know, live or try to live prophetic lives, and that is encapsulated in being, you know, worshipful, obedient servants of God who, you know, live on earth seeking to do good, and that's all of that is in terms of what you do, right? Okay. And so, yeah, if you were to reduce Islam to just an academic exercise, or you overly emphasize that aspect, then there's clearly going to be an imbalance. And you know, again, these are all anecdotal comments, aren't they? Right? I mean, on my, you know, based on my observations over, you know, quite a long period of time now, I would say that, yeah, that's definitely a phenomenon that's out there. But then, you know, you could sort of push back and say there's probably reasons for that, you know. So Islam wants, you know, seeks the entity as a whole, right? The whole package, right? That's knowledge, knowledge which is transformative, which then leads to, you know, more godly lives. But why knowledge? Why that separate knowledge, emphasis on knowledge? Because as Islamic civilization develops and grows, what was once a holistic entity or an idea or a concept at the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the companions gets slowly developed, you know, and the different strands in that get developed, and one of those is the issue of knowledge. Knowledge, you know, becomes codified, you know, as questions arise, disciplines develop, and then of course you move into the different broadly speaking, the two different areas of knowledge which is fundamental to faith and practice that all Muslims should have some kind of awareness of, and then a whole separate area which is academic knowledge of Islam, right? Knowledge of Islam, if you're seeking to become a specialist, you know, whether it's a mufti or a hadith scholar, muhaddith, or a YouTuber. Well, yeah. So, you know, there's a bit of, you know, I think sometimes those two things those two ideals get mixed up. Sometimes we maybe perhaps overemphasize the academic learning. Sometimes
what people was that statement of Imam Malik, I think, rahimahullah. Knowledge used to be a nuqta.
I think Ali radiallahu anhu said is supposed to, it's wisdom attributed to Ali radiallahu anhu. Maybe others have said it as well, but
How does it go again? Knowledge used to be a dot.
Al-ilmu
كان العلم
نقطة. كثره الجاهلون. I think, as far as I remember, you know, knowledge was, as you said, was just something small. Essentially, the word in Arabic just means like a dot, I believe, right? And then it was katharahu. It was expanded,
turned into an ocean,
right? Yeah, by the ignorant. Yeah, that has some relevance. It has some relevance, but you need to be careful of going down the anti-intellectualist path and kind of just dismissing the
I mean, in
Islam's a civilization, right?
Yeah,
okay.
As a career, just as a career, there needs to be people who are researchers, who are muftis, who are making cutting edge ijtihad on that kind of stuff. But I'm saying, look, when a person goes from maybe just not being Muslim or not taking Islam seriously, and then they kind of want to get more into the Islamicness or whatever, the thing that we normally tell them is seek knowledge, and then they go and they just start reading books from 1,000 years ago, which don't have much impact on their lives. They may even reduce their practice.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if look, I can't again speak authoritatively about what converts or people who are newly rediscovered perhaps their faith are told to do. I'm aware, I know that in some on some occasions, and I've witnessed it myself, they do get told to go away and seek knowledge, so to speak.
Maybe looking back at your own history,
but
well,
I think I don't think that was always in isolation. Clearly, if that is all you're being told to do, that I think again nobody's gonna. It's a bit of a caricature.
I don't mean it.
Yeah,
that's the only thing. But just the
an
fact
overemphasis. And if it's overemphasized, that's clearly a problem.
I mean, I forgot what his name was. This guy who was the head of design under Steve Jobs, right? In Apple.
Jonathan Ives?
No. Before him. So he wrote a book called Creative Selection, right? Okay. I remember I just listened to a lecture of his. I haven't read the book, but he described his whole thing in a lecture. Creative selection, like natural selection.
Yeah.
But it was like an interesting design process. But they were talking about the Safari browser, yeah? Okay. When they remade the Safari browser from scratch. And they had one main metric to keep in mind.
Yeah.
I always remember this now. This reminded me of this when I was kind of looking into this era. And that was, he goes, our main metric is whatever we do, it has to make the page load faster.
Okay.
Whatever whatever button you add or whatever you do, if it makes the page load slower, you have to make savings elsewhere or rewrite some code elsewhere.
Yep.
And that's our North Star, that's our aim, kind of where we're looking towards. And I thought, this is how we should be when it comes to knowledge. Any knowledge that you learn, it should have an impact of making your khashiyah increase, making your practice better, making you
for who?
For you yourself.
For any individual.
Not like a person whose job it is or is
right, there you go. Okay, so
the general
so
Muslim,
important caveat.
99.999%.
Right, no, but hang on a minute. Important caveat. You need to be careful again in the message. This is public, So, well, what is that caveat?
But even someone, let's say for argument's sake, someone who's a researcher or whatever.
I'm not sure I completely agree with that, Salman.
No,
of course.
At least it shouldn't have a negative impact on your practice, on your khashiyah, on your Islamic akhlaq. Not Islamic, on your akhlaq. Yeah. If you end up learning something, and maybe this is a bit controversial, but I think on a broader level, I'm not sure. If you learn something and it causes your practice to decrease.
Yeah. No, I'm not. Again, I'm not sure I completely agree with that. No, I'm not sure I completely.
Can you think of an example?
No, I mean we can clearly think of There are a number of sciences within the Islamic tradition that don't automatically go that direction, but you could make a case that they can, right? Particularly they're really they won't decrease, but that's
what I'm saying.
Yeah,
they shouldn't they shouldn't increase your loading time.
Right.
To use the metaphor.
Again, I think you're trying to, you're simplifying a little bit, Salman. Right?
Go ahead.
So no, I mean, you can because again you can't have the same judgment. Like if we take a block of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we can't apply the same outcome to that in all circumstances, right? Right? Well, because it's human beings, right? So that you may study and learn that, okay, and it actually increases your iman, right? somebody else could learn that same block of knowledge, and it has a neutral impact.
We're not talking about neutral, we're talking about negative.
Hang on a minute.
Yeah.
Just let me get there. Right. So, yeah. Right.
Go on.
That really doesn't help. Right. So a block of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Person A learns it, it increases them in faith. Person B learns it, and it just has no impact, right? And neutral. And person C learns it, and it actually decreases their faith. So how do you judge? But I mean,
so you agree that? Do you say that
it shouldn't have that impact? But I'm not saying for person C, right? That because it has that impact on person C, I'm not saying he shouldn't now learn that block of knowledge. I'm saying he should do something to counteract it.
That's what I'm saying. Make savings elsewhere.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. So the point, like the Safari browser example, if you do something that, so the point is we shouldn't even call that knowledge. That's information.
If you want,
my opinion. Yeah.
If you want, again,
I mean, there's data. Just
again,
numbers,
I'm not
whatever.
sure.
There's
again,
information.
I'm not sure.
And then there's knowledge. I think knowledge is...
You're again, we come from a faith tradition.
He's woken up, mashallah. I need to poke and prod him.
No, I mean a faith tradition. We come from a faith tradition, right? That's scripturally grounded, right? And that scripture has a language, right? That's the Arabic language, and inspired by the Arabic language, we have a set of terms as well, by which we understand and approach the world, okay? And as a necessity, we have to translate many of those terms, into our own particular vernaculars, right? And so we're using here now knowledge and information, okay? But then you need to be careful, right? Because when you go back to the original language, right, to Arabic, and the terms that are used, particularly those terms which have some kind of scriptural genealogy to them, right? Then we need to be careful, right? Because you're saying now you've decided to say that, well, this is knowledge and this is information, right? If we go backwards, can we make that distinction?
Yeah, we can.
Well, you haven't even let me complete the idea, right? Right. This is ilm, and what's
ilm
this?
nafi'.
Right. Okay. Well, there you go. What is that? Ilmun what? Ilmun la yanfa? No, I'm not sure you can say that, right?
If some knowledge decreases your iman
for that person, maybe.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but you can't make it luck. You can't make a generalization.
Yeah, of course. I'm saying on a personal level.
Yeah.
Obviously, someone might learn something beneficial and become arrogant or whatever. That's not beneficial for him. So that's my point of knowledge has become. I think we've absorbed just the.
See, so for example, take something. Take a common example coming from a particular perspective, right? Yeah. Which is the kind of really what's the word to describe it? Really in depth, you could say, investigations and discussions about the nature of God. Okay, and his being and his attributes, not just Asma Sifat, but just which in the Islamic tradition, if you move back into Arabic, right, is often termed ilm al-kalam, right? If you look at ilm al-kalam, if you come at that discipline of ilm al-kalam, right? So I've already, by the way, kind of explained what it is, right? And you look at ilm al-kalam from an antagonist. You come from it from a tradition that traditionally, right? An anti-kalam, helping me out. Jazakallah khair, right? You come from an anti-kalam background, right? Because there are groups and there are trends and strands of Islamic thought that have, from the off been cynical and skeptical about the value of that discipline, right? People have often described, have often said of ilm al-kalam that it doesn't, that it doesn't impact the heart. That it doesn't, exactly. And they make a generalization that it doesn't impact the human heart in a positive way. It doesn't grow. It doesn't increase one in God consciousness and fearing God.
And people say that.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say pro-kalam, but within the kalam tradition, or certainly a number of figures from the Sufi. Who have more of from a Sufi background, okay, many famous figures, from Islamic history, who've been practitioners of kalam or have been very well versed in kalam, have also been cognizant of some of its, some of the potential dangers. But then, again, like I said, we need to be careful. So if you, again, come from an anti-kalam perspective, it's very easy to come across generalizations where you say, well, look, ilm al-kalam, that's an unnecessary topic or subject area. And the best thing we can do as a faith community, as a civilization, is to ditch that. I would argue that that's a very dangerous approach and a very dangerous strategy, a very dangerous mind frame. You can say that, look, maybe not everybody benefits from a study in ilm al-kalam, and arguably even some people can get involved in a discussion, in a kalami discussion, right? And it does, as you said, it could potentially have the effect of reducing their iman.
I mean, I've spoken
but
to
I still don't
want to.
I still don't think that is sufficient to now to make a judgment on the discipline as a whole, or on a particular facet of it as being, ilmun la yanfa.
But it could be for anything. Could be ilm la yanfa. It's a personal thing. That's why even mashayikh that I've spoken to who teach kalam, they're like, no, for this guy, no.
Right. Okay.
It's not beneficial for you. Right?
But then that could be a lot of things.
Yeah. Exactly. But that's why I don't think because of the kind of I don't know.
We seem to have gone down a bit of a rabbit hole, bro. Mass kind of transmission of knowledge. Yeah. Or maybe standardization of curricula or whatever. It's become less about the point of knowledge in the first place, just to build a XYZ person, right? And more about like the enlightenment kind of view of knowledge of just pouring water from one vessel to another. That's how that's knowledge that's done. It's more just a cognitive thing. It's not kind of like if you maybe this would be a bit controversial, I don't know, heretical. If you learn, imagine someone who's been praying their sunnah and they all their life, and the sunnah prayers before and after dhuhr, maghrib, whatever, and that's normal for them. It's not hard for them. It's just a normal part of their life. Then they learn, well, actually this is, and learn, and the technical details. Okay, the one who does it is rewarded, and the one who leaves it is not punished, so forth. Then they stop praying their sunnahs. Is that knowledge that's benefited them? Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, I'm not sure too many people would argue that it has, right? But I mean, again, I'm not sure. So look, I mean, I don't think, broadly speaking, there's any real disagreement here, man. Yeah. But I think some of the more general comments you've made are slightly dangerous, and maybe.
Those are the best types. Put your thing close to your mouth.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Yeah, I was just I think the broad spirit of what you've said, I think very few people disagree with. But some of the conclusions you draw from that,
a bit heretical.
Not heretical. I don't think heretical is sometimes a trendy.
Let us know in the comments below if you.
Heretical these days is like seen a bit trendy, cool, right?
Like radical.
Exactly. Radical, heretical. So I think that's actually
what about
that's actually a clever way of praising yourself whilst pretending to.
Got to be careful with this guy, man. He knows all the tricks, mashallah. What about the contextualizing knowledge part of what the Shaykh said? How do you contextualize knowledge? How do you contextualize some, I don't know, half the things that we learn in a normal curriculum?
First thing is we should get Shaykh on and ask him directly himself. He said it.
What's your vision then for history, for Islamic studies on Islam21c? How do you think we could contextualize certain things to actually benefit people?
So so is this kind of some very long segue, long transition into talking about history? And this is your segue moment.
History is one of those things where, it's like, it can be argued. Now, this is going to probably vex you a bit. let's play devil's advocate here. History is not needed. It's just information and trivia, and it's not something that many Muslims kind of pay attention to, right?
I don't think they do. I think that one, I think anecdotally at least, is again, is it because it doesn't benefit? I'm not sure that's the reason.
Why do I need to know when the Battle of Hastings was to benefit my life? Unless someone who wants to be a millionaire or something.
Why do you need to know when the Battle of Uhud was, or Qadisiyah, or Ankara, or just thinking off the top of my head,
why? Yeah, is that useful? Is that useful in knowledge?
Is it? Yeah, it definitely can be. Yeah, I mean, why people don't so I mean, again, I'm not sure this is the best way to approach the subject, but history as a discipline in knowledge, if you take it from the way what you've set up as in terms of, there's lots of knowledge floating around these days. Lots of information floating around these days, okay, and many people are busy in information acquisition, and for a lot of those people moving into smaller and smaller sets, right, that doesn't actually have any positive impact in terms of an Islamic from an Islamic viewpoint. I'm not sure if, I guess you could apply that to Islamic history, but I'm not sure that's a fruitful way of thinking about it, right? Because first, on the whole, right, separated from that, do I think Islamic history is a useful and important discipline? Absolutely, right? It's just a function of any meaningful, mature civilization, and any civilizational enterprise, right, is to investigate and write about its own history. Islam is no different from that. Okay, just from.
So I mean, I caricatured it by saying when was the Battle of XYZ, just a list of dates and events. You haven't challenged that. Do you regard something like that simply as being history, or is it something more?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was trying to get there, but again, the nature of these kind of these things is actually, it doesn't often lend to mature reflection, does it? Because people's attention spans are often so short, and you're probably concerned about viewers getting switched off, and so any kind of meaningful engagement with your question is often difficult, because you want to kind of just chop it halfway through, and so really we don't get to say anything meaningful. But so first train of thought's been lost. And let's try to get back to what you're saying. Look, I think history is valuable, bro. I mean, if you keep it simple, maybe keep it to the level that you want, history's good, and we should learn history.
Why though?
Learning history, well, I'm not sure you really want a proper detailed answer, bro, because halfway through you're going to change the subject again. I'm trying to help you along, because you seemed a bit tongue-tied. No, I didn't seem tongue-tied. Just maybe a more reflective answer that has some pauses in there as well. Sorry, too many pregnant pauses. But again, is that what? Are we going to lose like 50% of the audience? That they're going to start going off onto their smartphones or something? Yeah. Look, Islamic history is very important. I believe, honestly, right? And can have a transformative impact on many Muslim lives, right? On the lives of Muslims. But I mean, I don't want to even, I'm not sure I completely actually want to even, just because I'm being thing here, right? I just want to stand my ground. I'm not sure I necessarily want to even go down that road, right? The road of Islamic history, and history is only valuable if it's making everybody pray, 8 rakahs more of tahajjud every night, or 8 or not more, just simply, let's get to the stage where we're doing that, right? And if it doesn't, waste of time, right? Chuck it in the bin, sorry, man, if that sounds thing, but that's the attitude of a lot of people. So I'm not sure I want to even entertain that approach. In of itself, right? So, which is why I actually come back to looking at the way you kind of decided to set it up. I didn't accept it fully.
That was a different.
Partly, but partly it certainly it flows very naturally. It flows very naturally into what we're talking about now, right? And whether you set that up artfully on purpose or not is besides
just make it look that way.
Is besides the point, right? I mean, just to know, right? I didn't accept everything you had to say. And I still don't. Okay, and I think here this is a good example of why just kind of generalizing the way that you did, right, is problematic because looking at the discipline here, Islamic history, I'm not sure that we can make that kind of easy armchair kind of judgment that it doesn't increase a person in their faith, right? Therefore, this is a
no, I didn't say it doesn't increase.
Right, or even as you said,
it
okay, go on.
Decrease.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, khalas. Which,
so I thought you agreed on that.
I agree that on the whole, bro. But I mean, I don't think it's an easy thing to use to like I said, because it's about individuals here. So I don't think it's an easy. In fact, I think it's not just easy. I don't think it's a useful tool. Full stop.
What should be
to decide the value of sciences as a whole? If we're looking at sciences or Islamic sciences in the abstract, right? Does Islamic history have any value or not? Let's use the yardstick of, does it decrease somebody's faith? Ilm al-kalam, does it, I don't think that's a valuable way of approaching it. Look, Islamic history is I think important in so many ways, right? I mean, we, as Muslims, okay, many of us, I'm cautious of making generalizations, right? Our view of faith, right, is that it's a tradition that has validity. Well, in fact, I'm not going to say I think it's fine to generalize here. I think pretty much every Muslim believes that Islam, right, expression of Islam and Islamic faith and practice today, right, is a meaningful. I'm kind of getting lost in my words here now, aren't I? So this would be a good point to kind of cut and do thing, right?
On the topic of useless trivia, you've been served. All right, name someone from the 60s who appears in high school history books. This was Americans.
Name somebody from, pardon?
Name someone from the 60s who appears in high school history books today. So the most common answer you think you'd get.
But we don't have high schools here. We have secondary schools.
Firstly, we do have high schools because I went to one. Secondly, I said it's from America.
Still, yeah, exactly. So I think we should just scrap that and chuck it in the bin. Right. I do not deign to answer this question.
What would an American high school book include?
I don't know. Elvis Presley or something.
Was he from the 60s?
No, he's yeah.
So it says
lived broadly through the 60s. Great. That's
there you go. Anyone else? Next. Okay, the number one was MLK Jr. You can see your eyes moving to the left or something.
Or whether I should just say Henry VIII, right? Just to be
close.
Just to be right?
No, Henry VIII was
or
few
John F. Kennedy
to
take it seriously.
Okay, he's number 4.
Okay, there we
on
go.
the list.
Right, yeah.
2 more. I've given you the first.
So again,
one.
do you want me a serious? Oh God!
I've given you the first. This is our history editor, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. No. I'm finding the whole process to be tedious.
You'll see the wisdoms later when you can speak.
Right. Okay. So we've mentioned JFK, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X.
There you go. Nice number 2.
Let's carry on. Yeah, Malcolm X.
One more person, number 3.
I don't know. One of the Beatles, perhaps.
If you know in the comments below, let's leave it.
John Lennon.
Let's leave it unsaid, unspoken, and we'll see if someone gets in the comments below. Right, second out of crucial questions, you'll be glad to know is the last one. Who do you think had the greatest mind in all history?
What?
These are Americans again. Yeah?
These are like really stupid questions.
Non-Muslims. Yeah. So who do you think, the general population, Muslim and non-Muslim, they were surveyed with this, who do you think had the greatest
surveyed
mind?
in the world. You've surveyed people across the world.
100 people.
100 people across the world.
100%. I don't know how many exact people. Was.
Where exactly were these people surveyed?
In the Anglosphere.
In the Anglosphere. Where in the Anglosphere?
I don't know.
That's going to make a big difference, no?
That's against GDPR.
Right. And what?
Regulations too.
England, America, Canada, Australia.
Where was it, Max? America, your favorite
They were
people.
surveyed in America.
Yeah.
The 100 greatest minds.
Yeah, in all of
And then again, where was the survey conducted in America? Was it in the middle of nowhere?
I don't know, man.
Was it, was it in some, again, it's...
It was carried out in the United States of A.
Yeah, was it carried out in some Ivy League? Well, it's not all the same,
It's all the same. It's Americans.
The answers are going to vary significantly. Random survey.
I mean, it looks like it was not.
Who carried out this survey? You guys?
I don't know who carried it out. It was
Where
carried
was
out
this?
on
Where
behalf
was
of
this
the
question
presidency.
picked out from?
I don't know. It was just sent to me, bro.
Right. Okay. Yeah. What?
Got another podcast at 4 if you might want to.
No. I don't. Daffy Duck was
Daffy
number
Duck.
one.
A service says. No, I'm afraid not.
All right.
He's a man of the people, normally, but he didn't quite get this one.
Go on.
I'll give you one more.
One more
try.
One more try.
There's 6 names here I've got.
Of the greatest minds in the 20th
Americans
century.
Celebrate.
Macaulay Culkin.
I'm afraid they don't know.
Oh, damn. They didn't think he was one of the greatest minds.
He's one of the greatest actors, not the greatest minds.
Okay, right. God.
But, if your house, la qadar Allah, is subject to a burglary, a pre-planned burglary with enough notice during Christmas, and I know who I'd want on my side.
Right.
Number 1 was Albert Einstein. Maybe you've heard of him.
Has some vague familiarity with him.
He's the second is Leonardo da Vinci, not DiCaprio. Yeah.
What's the difference between the two?
Da Vinci was in Titanic. Jesus Christ was number 3.
Okay.
Yeah. Malcolm X was number 4. Benjamin Franklin was number 5. And let us know number 6 in the comments. See if you get them. It's a bit of a shocker. Anyway, so back to you were saying about history, right? So a lot of Muslims, like myself, I'm not proud of this, but I'm a complete jahil when it comes to, history as a science. I only kind of dabble in stuff that I find interesting. Yeah, I've never actually sat down and read a history book for the sake of learning history. Is that something you find normal for Muslims? Is it something that annoys you, or do you think it's a failure on, I don't know, society's part for not making history, exciting for younger minds as they're coming up? Because I mentioned history. Okay, what's the benefit of knowing when the Battle of Hastings was?
Your question now more is about why is history being taught almost adequately or not? Okay, that sounds more like. Well, I mean, to me, I'm just saying how the question appears, right? That appears to be the question, and on that level, I would, again, my answer probably wouldn't surprise you, right? I don't think history's always taught in the most engaging, in the most engaging fashion, and that I'm sure has some. It's part of the reason why people don't know as much history as they do. Then there are plenty of other factors as well, right? There's lots of other distractions. People have less and less time for engagement in intellectual pursuits like that. Perhaps they don't, they've not the value of them. Of that hasn't properly been elaborated. I guess with something, hopefully we're trying to do that. We haven't, I don't think, approached that properly yet in talking about it. But yeah.
So how would you elaborate then for someone like myself? Because I do want to increase my knowledge of history, and on my kids as well. I want to imbue them with a sense of value for that?
I've tried in my own. I started trying in my own stuttering way to try to explain that. I don't know where that's going to end up in the cuts and the takes, right? This is version 75, by the way.
That was before the little segue, so let's just imagine it's cut out. So graciously giving you a round 2 at that.
Day 3 of this podcast.
Your hair's gone longer.
All these new stuff as well floating around us. No, look, Islamic history. First, before we get to the value of do I think I think it's worth saying, okay, even if it's just anecdotally again, right? That I think there's generally a significant level of historical illiteracy in our community. People are very, people know hardly anything about Islamic history on the whole, Muslims, right?
We know Seerah. We learn Seerah.
The general, even if you're talking about somebody who's kind of maybe engaged in their faith in an active way, for them, oftentimes, for many people like that, from my own experience and from talking to others as well, is that individuals like that will know a little bit about Seerah. They might know, if they're really studious, they might know quite a lot about Seerah, right? And they focus on Seerah, and then they'll, if they've paid history a little bit of attention, or they've seen some kind of value in it, that will extend to the companions, right? And they'll know a little bit about the lives of the companions, and especially the era. If we're talking about historical eras, about the Khulafa, right? The 4 rightly guided caliphs after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, and they'll know something about that era and the events and the goings on in those early decades of Islamic history, and then it will pretty much come to a full stop.
There'll be a big gap, and then Malcolm X.
And they might know, they might know, and then it becomes very sporadic. They may or may not know a little bit about the early caliphs, and then, like you said, Malcolm X would be a figure, and then it could just be sporadic individual figures. They may have heard, if you're lucky, like somebody like Salahuddin Ayyubi, the great Islamic leader who led the Muslim forces in recapturing Jerusalem in the Middle Ages, and from the many other great figures from Islamic history. They're individuals that they may or may not, know about. And we move into the modern era, and we come up with somebody like Malcolm X or others like him, and that's kind of the limit of the historical awareness, And again, it's a generalization, right, Salman? So we're always going to come across individuals, exceptional individuals who do know far more than that. We're not, the discussion is not about people like that. But Islam is, Islamic history. What at least explore some of the functionality, right? If you want, and the value, right, of Islamic history. We ascribe to a tradition that says, that it has value, right, in every age, right, and that Islam today, right, it's not just a religion. It's not just a set of dogmas and rituals, that were prescribed several centuries ago, and a Muslim is simply somebody who adheres to those dogmas and carries out those rituals. Very few Muslims would describe their faith as simply just that very small circle of issues, for want of a better word. Most Muslims will say that no, Islam is a civilizational idea, right? Islam is a civilizational. It's a civilizational idea. It's a faith that has a civilization that has a relevance in the modern world. And we live our faith in the modern world. If that's the case, right, and if Islam is a positive civilizational force, and Muslims that living Islam and living their faith in the modern world today, right, have something relevant to offer, the question is, how have we got here, right? You know, if Islam was a civilization when revealed and has remained so, right, throughout all of the centuries that separate us today from its founding moment, right? There's a question of how we come here, right? What was that civilization like, right, at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and what happened to it in all of those intervening centuries? Because we can often, again, like I said, if we go back to what the level of literacy is, many of us might be able to have a stab at, okay, right, no, Islam wasn't just the 6 pillars of faith and the 5 pillars of practice, if you want to say, you know, the shahada is, you know, not necessarily a pillar of practice, but, you know, the 5 pillars, okay? But it's more than that. You know, it was the community in Medina, right? It was Islam as the Prophet ﷺ and his companions lived in Medina, right? If you want you know, look at it in a kind of expressed in a media fashion, pop. It's like what we see in the Message, right? Or you know, not that I've seen it, but I've heard people chat about it a lot. It's what we saw on the Umar series, right? This is, you know, again, those people like me who didn't catch it.
It's a culture, it's a civilization.
Yeah, right. A really popular TV program talking about the life of that's covered the life of the second caliph, right? That's what people would describe.
Yeah.
So today, if we want to realize our faith fully, and not just have it as a little limited set of doctrines and practices, but want to have it as a fully fledged civilizational, you know, force, right, in the world, force for good, as it was, you know, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, something that we can describe. What about how do we get to how do we implement that? How do we realize that today? Do we simply transplant what we know of the Prophet and his community 1400 years ago to today? You know, how do we do that? Can that really be done meaningfully? You know, that's certainly one approach, right? One approach, you know, is to say that, look, you know, the only civilization that matters...
That kind of then kind of gets people in little bubbles, I guess. That maybe it's difficult to go straight from there and have a contextualized message for someone in such a radically different landscape. It's hard to exactly be like them when your politics is different, your culture is different, the way the economy is different, the markets are different, the climate is different, right? The way your families are set, your tribe is set up.
Okay, so you're already now describing what I think would be some of the problems with the very first approach to that problem. Yeah. Right. But I don't. Before we want to jump to that point, right? It's worth saying a little bit about people who have that view. There is a view. I mean, it's a caricature of people that hold that mindset, but they do exist. Okay, right. And again, you know, they're often described. I don't want to now. It would be unfair to say this is what Salaf, because you know the people that often are described with this kind of mindset are people we would label as Salafis. These days, and I don't want to be unfair or just make this as some kind of session where we kind of just bash Salafis. But you know, if you want to locate that kind of thought, that in its, if not in that kind of most extreme fashion that I just outlined, right, certainly exists, and that's basically that. Look, right, Islam. Islam, the only Islam that matters is Islam that was practiced at the time of the Prophet. We want Islam today. We just need to replicate that, right? And anything in between is irrelevant. Then that kind of thought does exist, and it's a problem for exactly the reasons you've said, right? And the question arises, you know, even before we get there, people will ask, you know, well, my faith, right? Okay, the Prophet ﷺ and his companions practiced it and they lived it as a community, but what about after that? You know, there is, like I said, there's this huge black hole, right? Almost 1300 years plus of what happens with Islam. What happens with Islam and God's revelation, the prophetic practice? How does that materialize in the world?
As a civilizational force.
And you're either left with that first approach, which is to say that, well, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant, okay? We don't need to worry about that. And in fact, people are the people who have of that persuasion broadly actually find Islamic history and the practice of Muslims in the intervening centuries to be something they're uncomfortable with. Okay,
it wasn't the pure pristine.
Right. Okay, it wasn't the pure pristine Islam of the Salaf, of the companions, right? Of the Salaf as-Salih, right? Okay, and the reason why I think history, one of the reasons why history is so important is because although we do, I think all of us valorize the Salaf, right? The earliest generations of Islam. Because the Prophet ﷺ spoke about their virtue, okay, and their excellence. And the Quran speaks about their virtue and excellence as well, right? Okay. But like you said, right, we cannot simply replicate their society in today's society without any changes. That's not a enterprise that is possible, okay? And not just that. If we do value what they said, then we know that their teaching was that Islam is something that is valid for all times and all places. And so it must adapt, right? It has adapted. And history, part of the reason of why Islamic history is so valuable is it's the investigation, it's looking at how Muslims tried to live their faith, tried to be Muslims, faithful to God, faithful to His Prophet, with all of the human failings and shortcomings that we have, especially as people who are, separated from that divine, that prophetic moment and from that, prophetic light, okay, devoid of that light, right? Without the Prophet ﷺ in our presence, our flaws, the human flaws, are only going to be manifested and multiplied, all right? So, any attempt we have to live our faith in a real way are always going to be, it's always going to be deficient, right? But the lessons are valuable. Yeah. The lessons are valuable because they're still, inshallah, we hope that we still have the best opinion of our parted, the Muslim brothers and sisters who have parted, and again, the Quran enjoins us to have that opinion of them. Right? They tried their best, okay, and they tried to adapt Islam to the circumstances and situations in which they found themselves. Sometimes that might have involved mistakes because of flaws in their character and stuff like that. But we kind of we have a filter for that, right? Or we're supposed to have a filter for that.
Now. I mean, you've inspired me to become less of an illiterate in history. Alhamdulillah. So just before we lost track of time a bit. Before we wrap up, I want you to just briefly explain some of your vision for the coming weeks and months for Islam21c, our history section now. You're working on what you call and loosely called kind of Muslim heroes of the modern kind of anti-colonial resistance.
That's just one project. So that's. So that's just picking up from what you picking up from the earlier question you had about which kind of alluded to reasons for why people maybe don't know too much history, and it's not taught very well. It's not packaged very well. It's not is to look at right. The project, one of the projects that we have on potentially on the go for Islam21c is looking at anti-colonial heroes from the Muslim world who fought resistance campaigns against European imperialism. What I think we've collectively sat down and thought this is a good project for a number of reasons. First, because the historical era is broadly speaking from the 17th century in the Common Era to the 19th, end of the 19th century. So why is that relevant? Why is that important? Because it's touching on an era of Islamic history that is much closer to our own. right? We've already said how, pretty much it's the very early phase of Islamic history that gets any attention if it does, right? The remainder of Islamic history remains this kind of just blank slate, for which people really know very little. The era that is closest to ours is of value because in looking and examining and learning more about this era, which is very close to ours, we get to learn about Muslims who are in a world that is much more familiar and similar to our own, right? That prophetic era is so far away, so distant, it can almost seem like another world, right? Whereas the world that these heroes inhabited is a much more familiar world to us.
So and the period just before our current,
right? A period just before, leading up to even some of the individuals that we're hopefully going to be talking about and producing some content on, like like Umar al-Mukhtar and Izzuddin al-Qassam, right? These are 20th century.
I hope that doesn't get us banned on YouTube or something.
Right? These are 20th century. 20th century. 20th century Muslims. So yeah, we're right up to the last, maybe just going back sort of.
We're 20th century Muslims as well.
Well, yeah, we are. So only just several decades back, and we get to that era. So the era, because there's a proximity to our own time, and that proximity means there's familiarity, and the familiarity means the lessons are easier to draw. The second reason, or not the second reason, the reason to approach this era through the lens of Muslim heroes. So the idea is to look at not just the colonial era, the era where European empires dominated the Muslim world, but it's to look into that era through the lens of great heroic figures. Because broadly speaking, heroic figures inspire and they catch people's attention, and we want to get people excited and interested about history. And so there are a few better ways than getting them on board by giving them the story of a heroic figure and selling them a good story. And many of these sadly neglected and unknown heroic figures still have amazingly exciting stories. And so hopefully that's part of.
I didn't know most of the ones that you were, you mentioned the other day. We were discussing it, and they were new to me, and the stories were quite inspiring. So really look forward to looking at that. That series coming soon to Islam21c, inshallah. No pressure, but yes, pressure. But
expect something in another 20, 30 years.
In the 21st century, inshallah.
In the 22nd century.
But it's been great speaking to you. I hope we haven't tired you out too much. It's been the first.
I haven't tired you out too much.
It's been the first of your monthly podcasts for Islam21c. Just kidding. Close up his face. Before we finish,
I don't need to, bro. I can tell you, these guys over here already don't want another one. They're running to get out.
They want to jump out the window.
Yes, right.
Before we finish,
I've succeeded in my enterprise. Alhamdulillah. Cunning strategy.
That's why I need to learn history, ladies and gents. MashaAllah. There's some Sun Tzu kind of maneuvers there. But before we finish, I think he's number 7 on the most
South American. Was he philosopher?
Faces on t-shirts.
Oh, that
guy. Before we finish, let's have a quick round of. We have to do a Islamic countdown just to see where we get on the leaderboard with today's guest. Right, Islamic countdown. You know the score.
I don't know the score, but anyway. Right. Consonant.
Consonant, please, Carol. L.
Yeah, vowel.
Vowel. Any vowels in particular? You got an O.
I've got an O, okay.
Yeah, lo and behold.
Another vowel, please.
I've got 2-letter word already.
Yep, another.
A.
Okay.
Hola.
Consonant, please.
Consonant, please, Carol. You have P.
Yep, and another consonant, please.
Another consonant. You have S. Those are good for the old pluralizing.
And a vowel, please.
A vowel, another vowel you have. Oh, lopso. 2 more left. Choose.
You sure? What? How many?
3 more left,
Yeah,
sorry.
3 more left.
Look at them Fs.
And consonant, please.
Consonanto. Is that a Q? Yep, you got a Q. Bad luck.
Okay, and vowel, please.
The vowel is E, and the final one with which the timer will start is vowel or consonant. Are you gonna spring for a hopeful U, or you're gonna go for a consonant?
No, I'm just gonna go for.
So the Q is just wasted. He who dares wins.
Okay, well then I'm not gonna win. Right, consonant, please.
Consonant, and your final letter is, when the timer starts, F. Bismillah. Oh, that's it, I'm afraid. Pens down.
Really?
What do you get? What's the longest word that you got?
Ooh. What's the longest you've got? What's the longest you've got?
I'm not playing against you, but I've got a 5-letter.
Oh. Can we have it? Can we win for the shortest possible word?
As long as it's not A.
I've got a. Oh, damn!
It's the long.
I went for 2. I went for so.
So is so a word? It's an avid reader, ladies and gentlemen. Mashallah.
I wish I'd got A now.
Is so a word? Okay, I think so is a word. Yeah, we'll give you that.
Okay.
I got fools.
All right.
I'm not saying they're connected or anything, but. Okay, now we have the old numbers round. I don't know, maybe you're a bit of a. If literacy ain't your thing, maybe the numbers are.
Wow.
I think I'm like dyslexic when it comes to numbers. What's that called?
I have no idea.
Dyscalculic. Yeah. All right. You know the score. You choose.
I don't know the score.
You say you like.
Cup from the top, cup from the bottom, cup from the XYZ, and Bob's your uncle.
Go on. He said,
chuck some from the top, some from the middle, and some from the bottom.
2 each. 25. Let me prepare the old timer. 25, 100, 4, 7, 2, and 6. And your target number is 693. And your timer starts now. Oh, I did quite well there.
Is it really 693? Was that really what was required?
Yeah.
Okay.
693.
Well, was that especially easy to induct
Pardon?
me? Was that especially easy to induct me in?
No.
Oh, right.
But it was completely random, so
Right. Okay.
What did you get? You actually got it.
I'm trying to show an aloof level of disdain
while
by
you're
not engaging
simultaneously calculating in your head still.
Not engaging in this, but it was so easy.
All right, what was it?
Have you got it?
I got 693.5.
You're being difficult.
Do you have to stick to integers or? Well, I got half out, 0.5 out.
Okay, well, 600. I mean, it was just even embarrassing than reading.
Oh, no, I got 603. Sorry, I'm thinking about something else.
You did, so you did get 693. We probably both got the same, right?
Well, what did you get?
6 times 100 plus 4 times 25 minus 7.
And there you go. MashaAllah. See? Pretty good, eh? So Jazakallah khair, Shaykh Kashif, for joining, and Jazakallah khairan to you. Thank you very much at home for joining us as well. It's been a bit of a marathon one, mashallah, tabarakallah. Let us know in the comments, your thoughts, if you agreed or disagreed. If you like this if you like this podcast, remember to give it a like and a share, and check out our other episodes as well. And be on the lookout for our new Islamic Studies and History section on Islam21c. And also, if you have any ideas for Muslim heroes that you want to be covered, Muslim heroes in the anti-colonial period, let us know in the comments below who you think might be in that top 10 list and who you think should be. Until next time, let's see how many people get it, and maybe you can use that info as data, some kind of statistics. But until next time, Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.